We're from Pillgwenlly Primary School, and we've been working on the writing revolution, same as everybody else. Our focus was how can the explicit teaching of simple sentences using the Hockman method support the development of writing with EAL learners in years 5 and 6.
Just to put our school into context, and this context changes practically daily. So at the point of writing this was accurate. It's probably not accurate now because we have new learners come and go practically on a daily basis. So this was accurate at the time. We're an English medium school in the city of Newport. At the time of writing, we had 666 pupils aged from 3 to 11 on roll. We have 18 classes in the school, as well as a large nursery with 112 children, a learning resource space catering for 11 pupils, and 2 nurture classes with 28 pupils. Pillgwenlly is a culturally rich community, and this is reflected in the diversity of our school population. There are 34 different languages currently spoken in the school. There's 12% of the school population are from white British or Welsh families. The other 88% come from a wide range of cultural heritages. We have 39.8% of the school community is entitled to free school meals. 30% of the children identified as having additional learning needs. Right, and Pillgwenlly itself is in an area of Wales with significant levels of deprivation, and the school is an area of Wales described as Pillgwenlly 4, which ranks as 10th the most deprived schools, deprived areas in Wales out of 1,909. So
slightly different to the last school, but that puts our school into context. We could probably add a bit more there, but yeah, I mean, one of the things we haven't included in there is how often classes change as well. So our children come in and out of school, so you never finish a year with the same class that you started the year with, and in every single class in the school's got new to English learners. So in every single classroom there'll be a pupil in there who's at the very, very early stages of language acquisition. Our rationale. The rationale behind our inquiry was to implement a range of strategies from the writing revolution in response to the Estin recommendations. We were inspected last April 2023, and one of our recommendations was to improve pupils' writing skills. So that was the core rationale behind it, was that we needed to work on improving writing. The study focused on 2 classes, one in year 5 and the other in year 6, working within progression step 3. And we were implementing 3 explicit writing revolution strategies: fragments and sentences, scrambled sentences, and sentence expansion. And whilst it says the focus was just on 2 classes, Viv and myself were planning the literacy. So it wasn't just our 2 classes that were impacted by the study that we've taken part in. There were 6 classes that essentially took part in this as well, because everything that we planned,
they had to do as well.
All the other classes did as well. So realistically, we're looking at about
the 78,
180 children have taken part in the work that we've started already.
So just to clarify, the writing revolution 6 principles are sentences are building blocks of all writing. By starting the basic foundations of sentence construction strategies, later instructions will be built on firm foundation with greater chance of success. So these 3 strategies, for the people who are not sure about them, are the fragments and sentences: identify complete sentences and incomplete sentences called fragments, and then correct them. Scrambled sentences are simple sentences that have been rearranged so that they no longer make sense. Pupils reorder words, adding in the correct punctuation. And then the sentence expansion, pupils are provided with a very simple sentences and then questions to answer to extend the sentence with additional details.
So our success criteria. The intended impact over the course of the inquiry would be for most pupils to be able to define a sentence, distinguish between a fragment and a sentence, unscramble a sentence and rewrite with the correct punctuation, expand a simple sentence using questions, for example, how, when, why, etc., and then start to apply these strategies within their own longer extended writing.
So the timescale was that the project itself took over 6 months. 2 teachers, Kirsty and myself, attended the training sessions delivered by the Writing Revolution trainers during the first 3 months, followed by subsequent sessions to discuss the project progress and implementation strategies within the classroom. However, for us, it must be noted that due to the SDN expectations, we'd already started to work on improving pupils' writing prior to the actual course starting. For example, we reintroduced a school-based toolkit that had been written for writing focusing on text types. So that had already started before we started the training. We had no choice, we had to get cracking.
Learner identification. A book scrutiny was undertaken and 6 EAL pupils were identified in each year group from a range of abilities, including some of the more able pupils who mix up their tenses and still use limited vocabulary. So whilst the focus would have been more on lower ability learners, possibly with other schools, lots of our children, because of their EAL second language, they still struggle, particularly with tenses. And again, within the SDN inspection was about developing vocabulary as well. The following samples of writing are from both year 5 and 6 and illustrate things such as run-ons. It's that same thing, the use of and repeatedly to join phrases and very, very simple sentence construction, often repeated sentence construction to form a simple paragraph.
So our baseline. A baseline was devised to determine pupils' understanding of what a sentence actually is. They were then asked to complete examples of sentence fragments, unscrambling a sentence and an expanded sentence. Following the baseline interviews, it was found that no children were able to give a really good definition of what constitutes a sentence. So their responses included, I know what it is, but I can't think of the words. A sentence is a whole thought. It gives information about something. All right, but there was no accurate definition. So that's where we started from.
So implementation. Once the baseline was analysed, a plan was formulated in response to the pupils' lack of understanding about sentence structure. Work then commenced on implementing 3 strategies. Activities on each were initially completed on whiteboards and modelled by the teacher on a daily basis for 2 to 3 weeks before application in the book. And we need to note as well that at this point, both Viv and I, as soon as we completed a session of the training, we wanted to try strategies straight away in the classroom. So some of these strategies we'd already trialled before we started the study. But once we sort of decided that our focus was going to be, we took one strategy and used it usually over about a 3-week period and just built on it over 3 weeks.
The sentence and fragments, the children very quickly became confident and accurate in the identification and the correction of the sentence or the fragment. So that proved really successful. Unfortunately, I'm terrible with photographs. We did a lot of it on whiteboards and I didn't take photographs. I'm terrible with things like that. So there were a couple of examples, but we did this every day, day in, day out, and again across 6 classes. And then we've just put a couple of examples, but this was the one that they picked up really quickly.
Yeah, and really lots of this was done on whiteboard. So what you can see here is sort of much later in the stage is at the start, it was predominantly done on whiteboards as a whole class. The next strategy we tried was the Scrabble sentences. Scramble sentences were linked to the text being taught to the project. When kept simple, the children were able to complete them accurately. However, as proven by the baseline, when sentences were scrambled with proper nouns mixed in, some of the children failed to recognise the need for capital letters, and there were some children who still needed simpler examples to work with. This led to the need to differentiate the task. So originally we were doing it whole class on whiteboards, and, you know, it worked quite successfully then. But once we started to introduce things where we got names within them, we'd taken out the capital letters and we'd taken out the full stops and the clues to help them, some children started to struggle. So what we then did was differentiated it as well, so that some children would have things like full stops in there and capital letters to give them clues about where the sentence would start and where the sentence would end. And then the more able children, the sentence were completely scrambled with all capitalization taken out. And that worked really, really well. I mean, the range in the classrooms is incredibly broad. To your maths learners, as we've said before, to the children who are at early language acquisition stages, even in year 5 and 6, still working on CVC words.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we went on to expanded sentences then. Again, this has taken quite a few months to get to this point, we didn't actually put that on. So once the first 2 strategies were established, and as I say, that took quite a while. So this is now looking at about February time. Pupils were introduced to sentence expansion. The introduction was heavily modelled and completed as a daily warm-up in the literacy session. And the modelling went on for weeks because this was the one that was the most difficult to introduce. It did take longer than anticipated introducing, because the pupils themselves, they wanted to change the sentence when they were rewriting the sentence, or they wanted to miss words out, or they wanted to change the tense. But so it took a long time to establish that the short sentence could not be altered. And the questions had to be answered, and then the sentence put together using the information just from those questions. So as I say, it took a long time to get that really established. And again, it had to be differentiated. So the one on the left at the bottom, you can see just 2 questions, whereas the one on the right for the more able learners, you have the 4 questions. And again, this is, I mean, when we went to did the training, they suggested doing that for our learners, because I mean, I've got a little girl who is still working within reception level work, and then I've got a young man who's you probably see he's working a minute, he's working towards year 7, so the range is just phenomenal. So to try and encompass everybody's needs, that's what we did. So right.
The impact. So the impact was immediate, and it was quite powerful. The children responded to simple rules and models to write sentences, which could be transferred directly into all writing. I think that the good thing about this is they are really quite simple rules that the children can apply, and simple strategies. And because we'd repeated them over a period of time, we'd built up them on whiteboards, then they'd had to go at them in their books. They were able to then use these within their writing and transfer it. And the improvement continued week on week. All pupils' writing showed improvement both in the identified sample group and across the whole year group, where teachers not trained in the Hockman approach implemented the same planning. So we were putting these on at the start for warm-ups in a similar way as the previous presentation, but all the classes were all doing it at the same time. And we have a weekly planning meeting. So in that meeting, we were talking to the staff about the strategies. So the impact wasn't just on the 2 classes, it was across 6 classes.
So during the post-project book scrutiny, it was noted that in all cases, children were using and applying more complex sentence constructions appropriately. Some sentence constructions were from the TWR, but others linked to copying author style. So we did a book called Dear Children of the Earth. So it was copying the style of Shim's Shamel. But because they were used to actually doing sentence level work, they could adopt those styles quite quickly. So children became used to completing highly focused daily sentence activity and accepting the rules associated with different models. For example, when we did explanation right, we did a daily causal conjunction in explanation right and dialogue in narratives. But because they were used to doing it, they just adopted it, and it's proved really useful, hasn't it?
Yeah. So these are a couple of samples of writing. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, this first one, he's a more able child. He really is. I mean, and when you look at that, you think, wow, it looks amazing. But when you actually unpick it, it's not very well organised. His vocabulary, he's got very good vocabulary, I've got to be fair to him, but it's not used appropriately. And when I was reading that, they did do it actually with the supply teacher because I was ill that week. It's a bit jumbled in places, and in places it doesn't make sense. So we took that before we did any training, and this is the one that we did with, should be Dear Children of the Earth, where you can see it's more organised, it flows better, his vocabulary is appropriate. I'm afraid you can't see it very well there, but you'll have to take my word. I mean, you know, it is, and it's in the style of the author, and he was able to maintain the style of Shamel's style all the way through the piece of writing, which they weren't able to do beforehand.
So the impact, So the follow-up listening to learners further supports the findings from the books. Most learners could define a sentence, were able to explain their understanding of the difference between a sentence and a fragment. And that was a big improvement, because at the start they really couldn't say what a sentence was. But that was one of the things that we did at the start of the lessons, is we just kept recapping on what's a sentence, just to move away from the concept of full stop and capital letter, because that was pretty much what they could say, full stop and capital letter. But we continue with that definition all the way through. Most of the sample group were able to correctly identify and use capital letters on proper nouns in scramble sentences. But as a cohort of year 5 and 6, this will need further work. So yeah, the proper nouns will still need some work on it. Nearly all pupils were able to expand the given sentences appropriately, and the book scrutiny illustrated the application of writing with more detail in literacy and across the curriculum. And we can see that in the previous piece of writing.
So overall, the impact for years 5 and 6 has been absolutely massive. However, we've got to say there have been other factors which have also supported pupils' progress. So for, as we said, the return to the hours literacy focus session, which we'd reduced slightly within the new curriculum, but we've reintroduced it and having a real focus session now. The re-implementation of the writing toolkit, which focuses on genres or text types. I keep getting told off. And the teachers' own work, because I mean, a lot of teachers in our school, they've worked really, really hard to try and get our children's writing in response to Essen up to scratch. The longer term impact of the project is going to be analysed at a future date. But during a recent school improvement partner visit, which we've had a few, it was recognised that there has been in significant improvement within the writings of years 5 and 6, thankfully.
So future developments, 3 strategies developing this research programme have already been rolled out across the school. So we've already had a staff meeting on those 3 strategies, and through book scrutiny you can see that they're already being used across the school. Year 2 have had a go at their fragments and sentences. I know year 3 have had a go at sentence expansion. So you can see the work in their books as well. The focus for next year will to be build on these 3 strategies and implement 3 more across the school, with year groups working on ones that are suitable for the developmental stage of their pupils. So what we'll probably look to do then is look at the sentence strategies and work out which ones progressively are more appropriate and where. And because our children are working, you know, year 6 children can be working at PS1. So, you know, we need to think about which are the strategies that are most suitable for those learners' needs. Links will be made between the work undertaken in the Writing Revolution research project and the Reading Reconsidered research project. The correlation between reading and writing has been long established, but the development of Tier 3 vocabulary undertaking in the reading project needs to have a direct impact on writing to ensure standards in writing continue to develop. So we will continue having a big focus on vocabulary to make sure that our children's vocabulary needs extending, that the models that they get in school really are that what they see from us is yeah, we just have to offer them the best vocabulary that they can have, and both of these projects offer the opportunity to them to develop this vocabulary and then hopefully apply it in their writing.
For most children, we've always said, haven't we, that whatever you want to see in their writing, we've got to get it into their heads first, because most of our children don't speak English at home, so they've got no vocabulary sort of role models at home. You know, they will be using their own language, but some of the parents' literary skills are not, even in their own language, are not where we would like them to be. So, you know, when we've got some very good children who just speak Bengali or Punjabi or Slovakian at home, and they don't, you know, this is it. We are their vocabulary role models.
Thank you very much for listening. And if there's any questions at the end, we'll be happy to ask.